Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, May 6, 2025 meeting of the Douglas Board of Selectmen. It is 7 o'clock, and we will all stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, good evening. The only announcement that I would have would be just as a note of thanks and appreciation to our staff and those cooks who made the staff appreciation dinner of, must be a week now ago. So nice. That was a really nice time to connect with people outside of really the work of committees. So thank you, staff, for recognizing our volunteers. Is there anyone else that would like to?
Just a shout out to the Douglas Common Preservation Society Hummingbird Festival on Saturday. It was very well attended. The vendors did very well, and there were young folks doing a dance, and we had a lecture by somebody about hummingbirds that hopefully will be repeated again next year.
It was happening up there,
Yeah.
town common. It's nice to see that bustling. And yeah, we'll do a little after-action report and kind of get a feel from all the department heads as to how that went.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think it's great to have activities in town that young and old can
Visible.
enjoy.
Yeah.
So kudos to our town common folk. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to something currently not on our agenda? Seeing as none, we will move right into a public hearing. A motion to enter the public hearing?
So move. Second.
Made by Ross, seconded by Mike. This is the poll petition 108 Vine Street. In your packet is poll petition number 310876962 for 108 Vine Street. Specifically, we're looking to install one JO pole on Vine Street beginning at a point approximately 18 feet east. National Grid proposes to install the new pole 3450 at about 60 feet from the existing pole 35, and new 50 kVA single-phase transformer on that same pole, of course, in our town. That is what is before us, and we have National Grid with us?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
We can. How do you do, sir?
Yes, hi, Al Galvin, engineer, National Grid, Hopedale.
What can you tell us about this petition?
So we have a new home being built that needs service. The current poles that are out there, 34 and 35, were too great a distance from where he has to come in with his lines. So that was the need for this intermediate pole to be installed. And also to keep stability of the voltage there out of the feeder along that road, they went with a new transformer to serve this customer. And so everything's in line with where the current poles are, no obstructions with any kind of walkways or traffic or things of that nature, so pretty straightforward.
Okay, thank you. I do see that there were no issues from the police department, the fire department, and the highway department. There was a remark from the conservation agent, and I'll just read that for the record. If a new pole is proposed on an existing road or driveway shoulder within 10 feet of the pavement or gravel surface, it is exempt. It is an exempt activity under the Wetlands Protection Act and Douglas Wetland Bylaw. Just make sure they put a half circle of erosion control around the pole. Is that normal?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone in the audience? Anyone online want to be heard? Entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Made by Mike.
Second.
Second by
Pick one.
you guys.
This guy over here.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion to accept the poll petition as it's been presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the poll petition for 108 Vine Street.
Second.
Made by Les, seconded by Hal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Poll petition is complete. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right. Moving on to item number 6, the property and casualty discussion. This has been a process, I would think probably spans 2.5 months. This board's been looking at this. We had always identified this day as the day in which the board would gather all information and make a determination as to which the direction the town should go. So what I'm interested in hearing from the board right now is, one, have we done our homework and are we prepared to vote, or do we need further discussion?
I've got my mind already made up. Yep.
Here, I'm good.
You're good, Mike?
Yep, fine.
Very good. All right. I do as well. I will say, this is the second time we've looked at this issue, and in my mind, it comes down to simple math. If we're comparing apples and apples, then we can feel confident in that, and at that point, being good stewards of the town's resources, we need to make a decision. Does anyone want to share their line of thinking or make a motion?
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah.
Being self-employed for the past almost 30 years, I will tell you one thing I hate is insurance. So I read all the gray areas, so to speak. Not what they're presenting, but what they're not, I guess. And it's not always a cheaper is better point of view. It's what you're getting for your dollar. I don't want to say return on investment, but it's money spent that is needed, the necessary evil, I guess. In reviewing what I saw, what I heard, I guess I'll just give you my decision. My decision is to stay with Maya. I like the training and the dollar, I don't want to say buyback, but the incentive for training, whatever department you're in. I just feel that's a bonus, and again, like an incentive to push for a safer work environment in all departments.
Thank you. Anyone?
Town administrator want to weigh in?
I think, all due respect, Hal, I think we're better off going around with the board members, trying to keep Matt neutral. That's just my own thing. I'd rather personally express our own opinions, and then if Matt wants to weigh in afterwards, that's fine. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, that's just my thoughts on it.
Go ahead.
I'll go next if that's, if we're going around the
Yep.
room.
Get the circle going.
Circle?
Yeah, the circle, that's.
Good practice.
I did look at the evaluation, the assessments on lands and stuff like that. I think that was what was more concerning is being more accurate with what the replacement values were. I get that Maya does offer the training aspect of it and stuff like that, but depends on how many people are using and utilizing that is the key. I'm with Ross. Insurance is
Necessary evil.
is a necessary evil, but it's also making sure that the values are there that you're being put forward are correct. Because if there is a incident that happens, that's when they're going to look and say, well, we had this insured for this amount, and go forward from there. And that becomes an uphill fight when you have to go back and try to negotiate for more if it was undervalued. I think I'm in favor of making a change. I think it's going to be in the best interest of the town, and kind of, probably, for the long term of good negotiating back and forth to look to make changes in the insurance business, with partners. So.
Thank you, Les. Mike?
Going through the presentation, you stated at the beginning that this has been going on for 2.5 months, and we may have talked about it amongst ourselves or through the administrator for the last couple of months, but our presentation is only a couple weeks old. And if they had the same amount of time to prepare for it, we didn't get all our information right out of the gate. We didn't have a cost of values from both sides. I had asked pretty direct questions, and I'll apologize to David for kind of punching him with that question, but I had to ask it. So I asked it. But I also asked the other insurance company about training. They didn't provide training. Asked them about devices. They didn't provide any devices. I asked them about any potential savings for paying it in full. At a certain point, there was no savings in that. If I was critical of Meyer, I could, and it's from both sides of the table, it's not just Meyer, there could be a better line of communication, and maybe that number would have changed from what was first anticipated. I think it got changed because there was actual competition in the room. That's why I asked that question, and I think it's a fair assessment. But I'm unsure of switching at this point, and for the simple fact is I don't think there was enough preparation in giving us real good information to go on, and things seems like they're coming in dribs and drabs since we had the presentation done, and I'm just not comfortable with that process. I'm more comfortable staying with what I know than what I don't know. So my choice would be to stay with Maya just for those reasons.
Noted.
I opt for going for the savings in secondary. I like the idea that you've got a firm acting as our agent, and rather than thrown in with everybody else. So I like the fact somebody's fighting, wants to keep the business, has a personal vested interest in making sure we're happy, so we continue to renew with them. So I would switch from Maya based on that.
We did it to you, bud.
Did what? Oh.
2 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
But it's good that
This
everybody
is-
had their reasons for different things, and I
It
think
wasn't an
they're all
easy
valid.
decision.
Wasn't,
No,
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 it wasn't.
it's-
No, I
Not
would
easy
agree
at
with
all.
that.
No.
and it's a difficult decision, right? Sometimes this board is asked to make difficult decisions, and that is, I think, what we may be feeling here. I believe in competition. I believe that in the long run, this will work out in our benefit, not only in the short term, but in the long term. But I do think it's time for a change. So with that, I would entertain a motion.
We have the formal applicant.
Mr. Chairman, could I have an opportunity to speak, or?
Just a minute, I'll add a courtesy, certainly.
Good.
Go ahead.
Oh, after listening to the presentation a couple weeks ago, there are some differences that the board should be aware of. The fleet schedule, again, here talks about vehicles for the quote at stated value, and some of the bigger stuff we are at the replacement cost piece. They referenced us not having hard unknown on the auto policy. That's not accurate. They referenced us not having a $4 million umbrella. That's not accurate. The aggregate deductible, that option that you are evaluating for the IOD piece, there are a lot of coverages that don't mirror what you currently have now. That $15,000 aggregate number needs to go into that number of 514 plus that. There's different deductibles under the professional liability. Ours are at 7,500. Theirs are mainly at 10, as well as the cyber piece. The cyber coverage has different deductibles. And they referenced the
Can I see the
square footage of
brochure?
this building here.
Yeah.
They
actually both in
they determined the square footage here of this building to be 100,000 square feet. That's not accurate. So the building's at 39,000 and change. So I don't know how the values and square footages were calculated.
These are both the same.
Our last evaluation of
that's
some of the
mine.
buildings was done in May of '24. So,
Okay, thank you. Tony, if you'd like to just respond quickly.
Yeah, I would just say the 100,000 square foot came from Maya's calculation. This is information that I was got from the town. So just using a regular equation, with the square footage amount. The square footage actually came from the town, so I don't know how that squares in. Probably the other thing that I would bring up is the 17,000 that we identified that in the workers' compensation that was not allocated properly. I'd like to hear right now if Maya's going to give that money back, because
We're not going to go that way at this point.
I'm just saying that was something I thought that was missed.
Yeah,
So I just thought I'd bring that up.
fair enough. At the risk of muddying, I think with this is the opportunity now to really just call for a vote and make the decision and live with it.
I move that we retain as liability insurance World Insurance Associates, LLC.
I don't know if the legal entity, would
Is
that
that the-
encompass all?
Is that the correct?
Just to, for the motion to be accurate, it would be
Yeah.
the insurance, property and casualty insurance package recommended by World Insurance.
Okay, accepted.
I'll second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'll call a roll call vote.
Davis, aye.
Smith, I guess.
Oh, and I'm not beating you up.
No,
Do
what
you?
you're saying.
Vote the way you want to
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah.
You don't,
Yeah.
aye is in favor of it.
Yeah,
No,
Okay.
sorry.
Stevens, aye.
No. Fitzpatrick, no.
Thank you. Bonin, yes. There it is. So, thank you all. David, this isn't goodbye. We'll see you in a couple of years, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yeah, and thank you.
thank you.
And again, not a easy decision.
No, not at all. Item number 7, the DCR land acquisition, which had been lingering for a little bit. And as I'm reading this, I have a chairman's announcement or something to read, so bear with me. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, acting through its Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, is considering acquiring approximately 11 acres of forest land located easterly off High Street by the Douglas State Forest in the town of Douglas, or other interests in such land. The property is currently primarily undeveloped wooded uplands. The proposed use for the property will be protected conservation and recreational purposes with public access. Attached is a map, Exhibit A, which shows the property DCR is interested in. The Douglas Board of Selectmen at the meeting is announcing and acknowledging the Commonwealth is considering the acquisition for the above stated purpose. My understanding, Matt, is this is completely landlocked and very common in the state forest.
So if I'm not mistaken, this is the property that's part of the old railway bed, have I got that one right?
Possibly.
looks like it's going,
According to the map, it looks like it touches High Street. High Street is on the Webster, yeah.
Do we have another one of these?
Another one of,
DCR.
Yeah.
this is the only one right now.
So if this is the only one, I think when when you look at the top graphical map,
Oh, okay.
this is very steep,
Yeah.
and there isn't any value to this property to the town other than having it become part of the state forest and preserved.
Appraised value is 35,000.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's part of the old Grand Trunk.
I think it is.
Probably
I think it's
a-
the old bed, and there was
Yeah,
cut,
an old-
this is a cut.
Yeah,
an old branch of it.
yeah.
So, just for perspective to us young and old, so the state's kind enough to let us know that they are entertaining this, and sometimes it makes sense for the town to object and raise a stink. Doesn't mean the state will necessarily listen to us, but with things being settled at Wallen Lake, things have gotten a little easier with our friends at DCR. And I think by forcing me to read that, there's probably some legal reasons that they like to use. So, I mean, I would entertain a motion not to oppose said purchase.
Plus, it doesn't, our objections in the past had been interfering with our
There's no-
economic
there's no
development.
vote.
This is only a notice. There's
It's a
no
notice.
vote.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
No, I was talking to.
Oh,
Tim.
okay.
That's
All right.
all. No, I didn't even hear what you said.
Okay.
Sorry, Hal.
no, I was saying is that in the past, we had objected occasionally when it was interfering with our, but now it seems to have gone another direction, so I have no problem make a motion that we send the standard letter to DCR.
But there's no votes to be taken
Yeah,
because of the
Just
agenda
enough?
item.
Okay.
On the agenda, there's no
That's all. I was trying to
possible
do
vote
is
thing there,
save
so
Tim from a vote.
really, we're not really going to do anything other than the hostage video where I read that piece. All right?
All right.
Love you more, Healy. Yeah.
On to number 8.
There's
on a roll
a
tonight,
literary device called sarcasm, and I'm digging myself. Item number 8, review RFP for town-owned real estate, 11 Gleason Court.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to move things along. I think the primary forum for this conversation is the Building Facilities Committee, and because of your meeting schedules not being in perfect alignment, they won't see this for another week, I think, but it has been circulated to them. And there are some conditions to the use of the property that were discussed at the BFCC with the chair or leading voice on the Historical Commission. Not the Historical Commission, I think the Historical Society. I will confuse the two for sure. I think it's the commission, because that was Rebecca. The society is Shirley
Shirley.
and Company. And so I took pains to take notes and to review the minutes in crafting this RFP. So really, this is your first look at it, and you'll get a recommendation from BFCC later in the process. But I wanted, because these documents are long and verbose, for you to at least take a look at what we're talking about for conditions of sale, because the review of the bids will be done by this select board. So it's primarily this scoring system, which is in section 7, if my eyesight's not failing me. I didn't put page numbers on here. It's almost to the end of the document. It says scoring system and decision rule. The decision rule for this sale would be the town will choose the proposal that is most advantageous to the town. Factors in the not advantageous column are the minimum requirements for the scope of work. Therefore, proposals that receive a 0 for any factor will be disqualified. So basically what you're saying there is it's an unacceptable score. Will take you out of, I should say, factors in the, I already caught a mistake, in the unacceptable column. So I'll make that change myself. Not advantageous means you meet the minimum requirements, and then everything that is promised by the developer above and beyond the minimum requirements would be the advantageous or most advantageous. So as you consider this document going forward, think about how comfortable you are reviewing proposals on those criteria and whether I've captured what you would consider important in making a decision. Just a quick word about the appraisal. So I won't have the property appraised formally until the BFCC has sent you a recommendation and you have voted on the RFP. So the last thing that'll come in here is possibly a threshold floor price. But I want to state early on in the process that this sale, as a condition of the sale, you must maintain the building. Therefore, the notion that you might have a significant appraisal, significant value for this appraised property is probably naive. The real estate has value because of its village location, but then you add as a condition to the sale that you're going to rehab the building. The cost of rehabilitating the building will be taken as a decrement against the price. So not unlike when we sold the empty lot on Gilboa Street, then we took as a decrement against the price the cost of building the bridge. By the way, we made out like bandits because it cost way more to build the bridge than the appraiser estimated in the end. But what that means is, so if the lot's worth $200,000, but the appraiser says it's going to cost you well over $1 million to fix the building and the conditions of sale in the RFP, then you're looking at minimum, just a minimum threshold value. In the grand scheme of things, that's okay, because what you'll be getting is a taxable property that's being used, and if the conditions of this sale will be recorded in the Registry of Deeds and will bind them to maintaining the exterior appearance of that building as it stands as a historic part of Douglas. So that's part of what you're getting from this transaction that doesn't necessarily have strict monetary value, but might be very important to the community. So, though I'm just pointing those things out. The BFCC, when we had this conversation, there was no opposition or no strong opposition to the idea of adding to the building. The only caveat there is that the addition has to be in character with the rest of the building and the neighborhood. I don't know that anybody would propose anything other than that anyway, but that's a consideration going forward.
So it's open to all uses?
All uses in that zone. So that's village business, I believe.
Of nonprofits, is that what you said previously anyway, restrict a nonprofit?
So zoning doesn't look at whether you're for-profit or
Sure.
not. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a business office occupancy. Are you thinking about the tax?
Yeah. But I'm thinking, a nonprofit could generate business, and those other factors could come in, depending on what the proposal was.
There's something that strikes me as not being possible about saying that we wouldn't take an application from a nonprofit. I don't know that we could do that. Or even if we could, I don't know if it would feel
Whether we'd want
comfortable.
to, yeah.
Right, because really, the issue here is that the town can't really afford to rehab the building.
Yeah.
And we don't have a specific municipal use for it. So anybody who's using it, it's going to help us out.
So just follow that out a little bit. Nonprofit comes in, wants to build a community center. And they had backing, and the community center didn't pan out. And the nonprofit or business entity no longer exists or doesn't want to stay in business. Do these conditions in some way, shape, or form carry on with the prospective new buyer?
So Attorney Bowen's task will be to make sure that these conditions run with the land, and that that's filed with the registry.
What about 40Bs?
It's pretty much a runaway train once it gets filed. Is there anything you can do to stop it?
Yeah,
No, I
I'm just
don't
curious
think we can-
about uses, right, as potential suitors that may come in. Hopefully, it's something business-minded, but just asking if there's any way around it. Once they own the property, there's not much you can do about that, but going into the bidding process, is there any restrictions on that, or can you put any restrictions on that? Something to look into and see.
So I think there's a nuanced answer, Mr. Chairman, to Selectman Fitzpatrick's question, because any entity looking to purchase this property would not have site control until they actually entered a purchase and sales agreement with the town. So if they lead with the idea that they want a 40B, I think you could say no to the sale. Once they own the land and they file for their comprehensive permit, it'd be very hard
Right.
to change that.
It's just a consideration for everybody if that's what they want downtown, or they want some sort of business building down there, professional building of some sort. I'm still stuck on the idea that I think it makes good sense to have some sort of medical services there.
I'm totally with you on that.
Whether dialysis or whatever, it's just a nice location, nice building. Basically you have 850 square foot suites in there, 8 of them. But I'm not buying the building, so I guess that's not up to me to decide.
Well, we could reveal your conflict if you want to put it, bid for it.
I think I got enough on my plate right now.
So, Matt, just process this is going to BFCC. We'll get one more crack at it
No, absolutely.
after, and then it's out the door? All right.
Looks like the town got good value. They paid $100 for it in, 1897, so all the kids are educated, et cetera. It's not too bad. Even with inflation, it's probably 10,000.
And I think like Oxford repurposed their old grammar school into office space and stuff like that, and it worked out very well with them. I've seen other communities get historical grants for renovating buildings like this.
Yeah.
I know it took takes a couple rounds for historical grants, but I think Webster got like $4.5 million.
The ironic part, you go into the inner cities and they still use their grammar schools.
It's a beautiful building.
It is.
Solid.
Milford just got a couple they did.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see it used.
Yeah.
All the elementary school buildings built in this area at that same time frame, whether it's this one in Douglas, which is a really nice example, or the Social Street School in Socket, or Polkview School, which is not that far from Social. Those are gorgeous buildings, and they have a lot of attraction as a condo. And, business-wise and medical use would be stellar. But as somebody who has, in my career, struggled to work with downtown businesses and keeping storefronts open, people hate it, but the real solution is foot traffic. If people live close by, they will walk to get their pizza, their shake, or to go to the convenience store. And when downtowns die, it's because nobody lives there anymore. It's the number one reason why. And just because of some recent events of my family's involvement in the city of Pawtucket, downtown Pawtucket was doomed to die when all the apartments went away, and it was all made a one-way circulator.
Around
businesses.
Apex.
A foot wall, right? But there's nobody who could walk there because now Route 95 cut the city in half. So there was absolutely no way that was ever going to work. In fact, they hastened their decline by doing the things they did. So Douglas, you have a nice little commercial area. Most of your storefronts are full. There are a lot of apartments above. There could be even more. And that's probably, if we do anything, that's what we got to work on. It's working with some of the property owners to use their upstairs space for living space. And then you get that lively sort of downtown culture, which is nice. But medical, as Selectman Fitzpatrick has already said, there's a lot of need in the community. And the more local you can be, the more comfortable you are. He said dialysis, I would think infusion center, it's almost the same concept, which is a nice, quiet place to go, very private, off the main street. And you can be comfortable and get your treatment and only be a mile or two away from home, which a lot of people like that idea. So, but you will get this with some edits, I'm sure, from the FCC. This is a big RFP, this is the last thing I'll say, because I'm including the 2000 report. So the architectural engineer who did all of the testing. Because I think morally and ethically, it's necessary for the town to disclose all material conditions. In this particular case, the town of Douglas was very responsible and took dozens and dozens of samples inside the building and remediated everything. So I wanted that clean bill of health to be something that is part of the documentary record. I'm not saying that you wouldn't find a couple of tiles here and there that maybe somebody missed or could have taken out, but for the most part, the town has done a wonderful job of managing this asset, even as a vacant building. And that's something that a potential buyer should take into consideration.
And that date's firm, did I see June 18?
All dates and RFPs can slip, that's my goal, but it can slip.
Okay.
BFCC's meeting on the 21st of May, so this will go on the June 3rd meeting for you guys again.
And that's enough time for the RFP? Or we're going to push that back?
I'm not in a hurry.
Okay.
Since I don't think you're going to command a lot of value here, it doesn't matter to me if it's part of free cash for this year or next. It just doesn't matter.
Good. All right, well, try again. Anything else before we move on to item 9, which is
The only thing I'll say for the record is one of the primary reasons why we're pushing this RFP now is we've had interest. It didn't go the other way around. We're trying to find interest with the RFP. We have 2 or 3 suitors that have come into the building, had meetings with us, discussed what their plans might be for the building, and the response is, of course, we have to follow the law and go through the RFP process. So at this point, the horse is pulling the cart.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a dynamic that we haven't experienced. All right, let's get that done. We're going to talk or have a discussion regarding retention of appraisal services for Douglas-owned land in Uxbridge, which passed, I think, unanimously yesterday, as did everything else for the most part. Thank you to all who attended. Matt, how are we going to find out exactly how much this property's worth?
So the money for the appraisal is going to come from your budget, the Selectmen's budget, so I'm looking for authorization to retain an appraiser and spend the money out of your budget. As you know, most of these appraisals are more than a year apart, and they're under 10,000, so I have a strong preference for, I don't know whose name is first in the name of the firm. It's Mike O'Hara does our work. It's O'Hara and Buthray, or Buthray O'Hara out of Worcester. Mike is at the top of his field. He has the highest level of accreditation that an appraiser can get, a commercial appraiser. And the timing on this has relaxed somewhat. The potential tenant for the building that wants to buy this piece of property is one of the likely suitors. And their time frame is deeper into the summer. So instead of rushing through this process, I think we're going to wait until July 1st, do the appraisal with the new budget, so that we spend it directly out of your budget, rather than doing any inter-fund transfers or anything here at the end of this year. And put the RFP out and have it opened in the early fall. So your first meeting in September, regardless of when Labor Day is, whatever the first meeting you have in September. And the property is going to command a decent value. And the reasoning here is that it is industrially zoned in the town of Uxbridge. And after a lot of really detailed work by our assessor, who's not a title attorney, but assessors have a lot of skills in this area, This was land that was donated by SETI Aldrich at one point, and when the Aldrich donation was made to the town of Douglas, there was an easement granted from the entire holding, the entire Aldrich holding to Northeast Maine, on our side, Hartford Avenue, on the other, across the Boswell land. And it was not tied to any specific location, so you're not going to see a dotted line on a map where there's an easement that's been demarked as a matter of deed. It's just a general easement all the way across. What that means is if the land is not landlocked, it has access to the street, and it's zoned industrial and it's 16 acres. So in terms of finding comps, the appraiser's going to be able to find comps to compare this to and get a per acre value for industrially zoned land with access to a road. That is not at all how any of the potential suitors have discussed using it. Their focus is on Gilboa Street and their properties in the area. I would not be surprised if we got competition for this. And you roll the dice, right? You know who wants it.
Yeah.
And you want them to be successful. At the same time, that is not our duty. Our duty to the town is to get the most value for that real estate. So the RFP will be fully circulated to everybody who might have an interest. The only limitation will be the same, and you'll remember we did this for the vacant land in Gilboa. It has to be tied to a project. So we don't want somebody to buy this in land bank,
Spec it. Yeah.
and we don't want somebody to buy this to block somebody else from doing a project. So that is a minimum threshold requirement. The proposal will not be considered if they don't submit some form of conceptual plan for how the property is going to be used. So they spend a little bit of money to submit a bid. So that's basically how we're going to go about it.
So we do an RFP for that? I remember sitting here at one point.
Yeah, the appraiser's value will be the floor value. So a price not to be less than.
Can you do an RFP and an auction?
We could. And the thought has crossed my mind, and I think might be a policy decision for this board to make. I will button that up with the Inspector General's office. I believe we are allowed to do a live auction. And I think we would have to retain the services of a licensed auctioneer to do that.
Yeah.
And so we would be leaving some of the money on the table for minimal value. But it is what it is, we'd follow the law. But it would allow any parties, if there's more than one party interested in buying it and they want to fight with each other, it would allow them to bid up the price until they're
I think
exhausted.
a sealed bid would bring you more value, more money.
Yeah.
The problem with the auction is that there's a fee associated with that, 10, 12%, 15%. And then
Is that high for something like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Last time we did the big,
Yeah.
because you got to get a good one, and there's not that many around.
No, he's one of the best, you know. But, yeah, I don't, because it's commercial and industrial, and I think it's better one or the other, right? Because you're not selling other land with this, so it's not like
Yeah.
where you got 6 different parcels.
Yeah, no, I was just asking. It's a
Yeah.
question. All right, well, that's exciting.
Want a motion?
Sure.
Make a motion to authorize the town administrator to retain appraisal services for the Douglas-owned land in Uxbridge.
Made by Mike.
Second.
Second by Al. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Item number 10, Matt, you have news regarding the community development position.
Yes, so I have made an appointment for the position of Community Development Director. Under the Special Act, the Select Board has 21 days from the date of notice to act favorably or disfavorably upon that appointment. If you do not take any action, the appointment will be effective on May 20th. Now, that's the technical details of it. As you know from past conversations, I always encourage the board to be involved in the process and to get eyes on the candidate. Since you have the ability to vote, you shouldn't pass it over. This candidate emerged from a competitive process. We had a total of 5 applications submitted. 3 met the minimum qualifications of the posting. And we interviewed all 3. Once, we interviewed the appointee, Mr. Charbonneau, twice. And it was our view as an interview team that he gels very well with us as a staff. Injects a level of engagement and enthusiasm and energy into this role, which is badly needed in that department, because there's just a lot of work. There's just a lot of paper coming through, a lot of attention to detail, and having someone who really enjoys this field, that positivity spreads, it's contagious. And that was probably the biggest takeaway I had from the interview process, was just the energy level was really strong. And the interest and commitment in terms of the research done on the town before the interview. And then last night, for those who are observant, the appointee was attending at our town meeting to try to get to know the personalities of some of the folks in the room and introduce himself to some people. So that's a level of engagement that I think is a very strong positive sign. So I'm hoping that we can move forward.
Wonderful background, that's for sure. We've another wooden socket person in here.
Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of keeping things moving along at a quick pace, I don't need 21 days to acknowledge that I have no opposition to the appointment. I don't know if anybody else feels that way.
Same.
The gentleman's going to need to give a notice to his employer, and all we're going to do is prolong filling that spot, and it's desperately needed.
Correct. That's where I fall too. I was able, I think at Matt, your request or how it came to be, but I served on that interview committee at least for that day, and I totally agree with you. There's an enthusiasm there for his work, and I just thought he's going to fit really nice into the team that we've built. So I would definitely entertain a motion to acknowledge Matt's desire to appoint.
The only problem is you don't have possible votes on that. So that's why I did it the way I did it.
Right.
So it's kind of an informal way, but if nobody has any opposition, that should give Mr. Town Administrator a clear path to move forward.
I just want the record to reflect that Lisa mouthed the word sorry, and Lisa, this isn't your agenda, this is mine, all right? And I say mine, but I...
Oh, it's as much mine as it is anyone else's.
It's everyone's agenda, and we missed it. But I think, Matt, you get the consensus
And
from...
being Tim's assistant, I just try to pay attention.
Yeah. He's going to be known as the possible vote stickler, that guy. I understand why it's there. It was actually when I first started, it was never on these things, but I understand why it's there.
You can still vote on the 20th. The appointment doesn't take effect until then anyway, and we've talked about possible first date, first day of work would be after that.
Yeah.
Well,
So
but at least
if you
you
wanna
can
give that-
you leave tonight knowing
Knowing that he's fine.
nobody has any
There's no
opposition.
opposition.
They can speak now, we're not voting on it. Just my thought.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, completely agree.
And if there were questions, I'm sure John would be available to you, but at the end of the day, the committee was quite unanimous, and you're going to support Matt in developing his team. So we will go on to item number 11, review of annual appointments.
That might be-
Be the same.
You have too many appointments on the page.
I was, see, was going to crack a joke about, leave it alone.
You're already in trouble with the other one.
Yeah, no, that's okay, people know. Yeah, so we've got a number of appointments to be made at a later date. Just remind the townspeople, the ones that did go to town meeting yesterday, there's still a number of important committees that are lacking bodies, and I would encourage anyone interested in getting involved in town government to come aboard, give us some of your time and some of your talents, and it is a rewarding thing to fulfill your days and weeks and a month or two with community work.
And we're not taking any votes on this, it's just a comment or a question. Should we consider looking at town council, specifically land council, to see if we can get any, just as we did in property and casualty, any competing firms that would be interested in throwing their hat in the ring?
I think it's a good opportunity to always review and visit that.
It's a one-year appointment, so it's something I'd like to look at. It's, for whatever reason, I feel because of other boards that I'm on, that the service has kind of fallen a little bit from what it should be.
And that's land?
Yes.
I don't have any objection to that. I think competition's, like I said earlier, a very valuable thing. And it is an annual appointment, and we probably, for a long time, just taken that for granted, so.
People get complacent, so.
So the question, Mr. Chairman, would be process. So the appointment of council is the unique domain of the select board. Now, some of our sister communities, brother communities, gender neutral communities, whatever you want to call it, treat this almost like a true RFP process, which I have to say, I strongly disagree with that. Price and other considerations like that really shouldn't be driving the bus on appointment of council. We're looking for commitment and qualifications, who's going to be staffed, how many hours are we going to get, what kind of contract is it going to be. It's a much more complicated discussion than a simple RFP, how much is the per hour cost going to be, or, did you go to Harvard versus, night school. Some of the night school attorneys do a wonderful job, so it's, you get impressed by the fancy paper on the wall, but at the end of the day, who's working really hard for that client and getting the cases managed properly. So if you have any thoughts on what kind of process you want to have, an RFQ is different. It's a request for qualifications. They send your firm resume and your specific resume for the managing partner that would be the client contact, as well as who's actually going to do the work. That's one way we could go about doing this. It is your appointment, so I think staff may not pull any punches. If you want to interview different department heads or me on our feedback on the performance of council, I'm more than happy to do so. I will use specific examples. I'm not going to, and I'll let you make up your own mind, but I'll tell you that we have this shared role in managing litigation and the legal framework of the town, where the decisions are made by the select board, but the day-to-day management of those cases falls to the town administrator. And on some cases, I think we've been let down, and I would be remiss, I would not be doing my job not to point those things out to you. And that's only land council. I don't feel that way at all about general or labor council. Then just the opposite.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
The question I would have is, what role do the land council, planning board, ZBA, Concom, those?
Part of it is going to be, what do you want it to be? So I think there's a conversation that we need to have with our planning board members and our conservation commission, zoning board members. I think the issues that face this community are complex enough where it should not be a rarity to have council at a meeting. It should be the opposite. It would be a rarity when council's not present at a meeting.
Yeah, for sure.
And that might mean more money. And a year past, I had more money in the legal representation budget to try to accomplish this. At this point, though, any money that's spent on representation that doesn't get the job done is a complete waste. The whole annual allocation is a waste. So that's where my head is at on that. And personally, I think having a new community development director is going to help the planning board substantively and with some legal questions. But we are consistently facing issues because of the age of the town and the age of the deeds and the records and the complex family relationships around title to land and a whole bunch of other issues. We're run up against legal questions constantly. So we're very solicitous of legal assistance because we're not qualified to make those decisions ourselves. Especially since Massachusetts has any number of unique rules that go along with A&Rs and site plan review and a whole bunch of things. So that's, we really could use more help and more attention to the details of some of our cases.
Have we run into problems on a board as a direct result of council not being present?
It is my view that, yes, that is the principal fall down. Once something gets to court, I don't have a whole lot of complaints. In fact, I'm fairly happy with recent performance, with one major exception, that was before the zoning board. But other cases that have languished for a long time have gone the town's way, and that's because of good legal consultation. But it's the board work, it's just, it's all over the place. And so, for instance, just being able to, there was an A&R application on a recent planning board meeting. In the absence of a community development director, I provided the clerk with a memo based upon the A&R review standards and my own ability to read a plan, right? And I simply noted that the access to one of the rear lots was questionable under the A&R standards. But that's the best I can do. I can't offer a legal opinion on whether it meets the adequacy of access that's required for an A&R application. And we tried more than one time to get legal counsel to weigh in on that and didn't. So then the planning board meeting was kind of like all over the place, and people were commenting. So it's one thing to say, this is ugly and I don't like it, because that's going to be true of many plans. But the question is, does it meet the legal standard? Did the engineer properly present a plan that met the legal standard for access? Unfortunately, the answer is probably yes, right? But you needed an attorney to say that, and instead we kind of went around and around. And I think eventually the planning board did the right thing, but it was way too painful. It didn't need to be such a convoluted process.
And it's not like there's only one or two situations, and this is becoming more and more frequent. As it happens on things that I participate in, I bring it to the administrator's attention, so then he's aware of it. There's things that they should be communicating with the administrator prior to making certain decisions, and they're not doing that. I don't know what the reason is, but we're at a point where we really need good representation. For zoning, for argument's sake, if they're requested to come to zoning, it's not to hang out. We actually need them there to make sure that we're making good decisions. If I have a question because they're on flat rate, I'll call them up and I'll ask them a question. Always make sure that Matt's fully aware of what I'm doing and what I'm talking about, and what the answers that I got. But we seriously need to look at it. See what other options are out there. If at the end of the day we end up with the same company, maybe they sit taller in their seat and they're more attentive. But when they show up at a meeting and you have an opposing attorney making their statements, and your attorney sitting there just nodding their head and saying that, why don't you just go sit with them? Right. You could at least talk to us afterwards and guide us or give us some different direction, but not impressed.
I would just further add, I think it helps, boards, having sat on the planning board, in the meetings, such as ZBA. It helps boards having legal counsel or ability to attend meetings and stuff like that. And it protects the town's long-term interests and stuff like that. So, you know, I'm in favor of kind of looking at seeing if we're, you know, getting the hours and everything else and the attendance that we need, that's in the best interest of the town and the residents. So that's thought process.
The other piece of it is efficiency of operation. So I don't think it's happening so much now, but in the recent past, it was the case where an application to the planning board could take 2 or 3 months to get through. And it's because sometimes, not always, but sometimes, there's an unanswered question. So now we're going to continue this to the next month's meeting, and in the intervening time, we'll have council weigh in on it. Our responsibility to the applicant and to the board is to have those questions teed up before the board meets, and have the discussion with council be part of the packet, then have council present at the meeting to answer any questions about what was offered in the packet, so that the applicant can get their approvals in a timely manner and not have pay their engineers and their attorneys and everything else double duty to sit through a 2 or 3 hour planning board meeting twice in 2 months. So I think that's where we could tighten up.
And our volunteers could use the professional guidance.
The issues are often pretty complicated, and it's not,
Too
I wish everything
complicated.
was light switch, but it's not.
Yeah. Too complicated for a volunteer to still, you know, cutting his teeth or her teeth. All right, so we'll talk about that more. Probably gotta get that
Well, these
process
appointments
together.
have to be done by when?
July 1st.
July 1st, so the sooner that we can
Yep.
have the administrator move forward with the RFQ, RFP, or RF, whatever, would give us proper time to do something. We're already in May. We're going to be at the end of May. It's not going to give much time, so.
No.
With having no legal requirements for how long it's posted, so if I drafted something for you, Mr. Chairman, for May 20th, got it out the next day, assuming that it met your requirements, and it would give you the month of June to have 2 meetings where you can interview interested parties.
And our new guy will be able to weigh in a little bit and be maybe part of the
Might be a resource and get it.
discussion. So, all right, so that's on track.
Yeah, the administrator's fully aware of all the issues that's been ongoing. I have confidence that he knows how to pursue that, so.
Well, the new guy might have a land council that he has a good rapport with that may be interested in our little town. Meeting minutes, April 1, no joke. Thank you, got it. I always knew you were the brightest. Get a motion on April 1?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as written for April 1, 2025.
Made by Mike,
Second?
seconded by Hal. All those in favor? Aye. On to April 15. Who wants to make a motion to approve those?
A motion to approve the meeting minutes as written for April 15th, 2025.
Made by Mike,
Second.
seconded by Hal. All those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. With item number 13 is a placeholder. I don't believe we have anything on the municipal light department. You've been pretty
Just a
busy.
little bit of an update. There comes a point in every economic development discussion where someone's got to frame the question and start to push project proponents in a direction. Because left out into the open, it turns into almost like a wild, wild west free-for-all, and people make decisions based on some pricing conversations and not thinking about long-term issues. And then you may have some parties that are beginning to drag their feet that maybe need to tell them to move on so they can get to the next thing. The notion of municipal light has always been driven by the opportunity presented by having some power generation or storage, not necessarily one or the other or both, but one, at least one of them, power generation or storage, that the municipality would have a legal interest in and would have an alternative source of revenue to the community, as well as the flexibility and the redundancy of being in control of some of your own power. The notion has always been that at some point the town might be able to take a position in the capital stack that makes the deal work. It wouldn't be a very large position at all because the town's a small town. But it might be that thing that gets you past some of the bureaucracy. Because municipal light and power has a lot of freedom from DPU that a typical commercial carrier wouldn't have. So we could move a little bit faster and those kinds of considerations. There's been a lot of change and a lot of activity, a lot of volatility around site control at Pine Sand and Gravel. As we sit here tonight, site control is in the hands of the families that own the underlying properties. I believe there are 4 major parties in consideration that discuss the future of the property. There's the DeVries family, the Bedoyans, Pine Sand and Gravel itself, and I think Carol has a piece. If she doesn't, she has an abutting piece. But there's definitely 4 parties at the table. Those 3 are the principal ones. And we identified at a key juncture here that data center industry is attractive for anybody who can swing a site that would meet their requirements, because the revenue potential for the town would be enormous. So like degrees of exponential growth beyond anything we could do by putting up buildings, regular structures. So that being the opportunity, the question was, can we balance the demands that those types of facilities put on the community with the benefit? Because there's definitely a downside. And as the conversation has developed, I think we've backed off the notion, and I love Bob. Bob's always enthusiastic. So we'll say, we'll build one of those things. And he's, well, let's build 10 of them. When he starts doing the math, and it's like, we're going to be $1 billion town. But I've never been of that mindset. 1 or 2 of those structures fully equipped is more than happy enough new growth situation for the community and doesn't require the construction of a massive power plant. There's a set of entities out there that have made a proposal that I personally, as an economic development guy, think is very compelling, and that I would like them to develop their business case further, which is their primary development would be greenhouses, not for cannabis, for other hydroponic crops that are grown inside, the lettuces, the vegetables. And they're reason why they're looking at our site is because they would be able to tap the gas line and build a cogeneration plant that would provide not only electricity, but heat. So it would be extremely efficient, and it wouldn't have a stack like a traditional power plant. These are basically jet engines running laterally. And you could build enough of them where you could have enough power for an independent source for 2 smaller sized data centers. And then you would have the room there for a substation, so the grid would be the second source of power. So data centers need redundant power. They need an independent source and they need the grid, because they can never go down. So if we had 200 megawatts of energy, the heat is primarily being used for a really cool industry. I think indoor agriculture is an important thing for us to consider going forward as a society. It also has a certain amount of longevity associated with it, right, because people got to eat, right? So you're going to have that facility there. But it would also make the economics of cogen work, because it doesn't necessarily work that well for data centers. But if you had a source that would, an off-taker that would take the heat as well as the power, and then all the excess power, this is where municipal light comes in. The town could be the off-taker of the excess power into a battery array, and then we could play the game of selling power during peak periods and get a return. So I like that business case as a recommendation to make to the town. That means having to push through some of the crowd here that everybody's interested. This is a great site, fantastic development site. Probably one of the best in Massachusetts and all of southern New England. So for that reason, it's not a town property, it's not in our control, but we can try to take a position and say what we really like to see there, and what we really like to see there is something that is visually not obtrusive, that has minimal truck traffic, would still employ people, but would generate significant amount of revenue for the town, and not really upset the quality of life. That's a lot of balls to have in the air all at once, and this type of proposal starts to check a lot of the boxes. So my hope is with Bob pursuing grants and some of his leads and a new community development director and some support from the family group, that we would begin to start to push this to fruition. And that might mean, parting company with some people we've been working with up to this point. But if that is the way it's going to be, then so be it. Money walks and you know what, money talks, you know what walks. So we'll see where it all goes. But that's where we are with this. It wreaks havoc, obviously, with the financial forecast for the town, because without ongoing growth, you are still a residential community, and you will plateau and grow very slowly. And that's fine, but I'm hoping to see that there's some kind of project that will come into fruition in the next 2 or 3 years, so that you can continue to manage the tax burden on your residents.
Yeah. I think this budget, last night was indicative of, the reason why we're pushing this is because we're going to need it. So I say give Bob a bigger jar and throw him out in a lightning storm and let him catch it. It's cool. Thank you. Your report, Matt?
So, a couple of things in my report. First of all, I want to thank Selectman Fitzpatrick and the entire board for keeping me out of that discussion about insurance. I have to work with whoever you chose, and it was important. And I might have to continue to work with whoever you didn't choose, for whatever reason. Just to establish the record, your insurance program is only one piece of the management of the asset base of the community in an efficient manner. The single most important piece that many communities neglect is whoever sits in my seat, and in Gene's seat, and in Courtney Keegan's seat over at the schools, Jeff Collette's. You have to address risk management. So you have to go through, and Adam Furneaux does a fantastic job as your highway superintendent, keeping his OSHA card and other OSHA training all up to date making sure all of his workers are up to date, minimizing injuries, getting after the building issues. You know, we will find a sensor program that works for us. And frankly, force the insurance company to pay for it, because it's just part of doing business. Or we'll buy the one we have, or we'll just keep it, who knows. But we've come a very long way in the last 8 years in terms of how the town manages the risk of its older buildings and older vehicles and training staff. And we have to just continue to hammer away at this. Probably our biggest issue is cyber liability and just staying abreast of all of the things that go on. It's such a nutty, scary world with the crazy things that people do. And people have the tendency to be vile when it comes to this. They take advantage of people who are in a vulnerable situation. Some of the people get really ripped off from cyber criminals. It's during a disaster response. So people have the tendency to be stressed, and they're opening things up and giving their information, and all of a sudden they realize they've been scammed. So all of the things that we put in place to manage risk are a necessary component of keeping your insurance costs manageable. But the most important piece is managing the budget in a manner that there's enough free cash every year to make capital investments in the plant and facilities of the town. You have to stay on top of this stuff. There's a tendency here in the Northeast, we're all frugal people, we're all very self-reliant, we want to do it yourself everything and make assets last forever. The building we're sitting in is 100 years old. It was built to last 100 years, and it will last another 100, I think, if we manage it properly. But there is a point at which you have to part the cash to make the improvements that are necessary. When the equipment starts to fail, it needs to be replaced. When the roof starts to leak, don't go up there with a bucket full of tar and slap it on there and think you're solving the problem. Once the roof goes in one place, it's going to go in a lot of other places. And the damage that gets done in the buildings that cost what they cost today is millions and millions of dollars worth of damage can be done, depending how expensive the building is, obviously. So those three components come together, right? Do you have the right insurance coverage? Do you have the right risk management program? And are you investing in your capital assets at sufficient pace where they're not deteriorating and falling apart and hurting people? That's where I think where we are. So what was interesting about this conversation is that no matter how you voted as a board tonight, you were going to save money over what we had budgeted. So that was one of the critical components of the learning here, was forcing the competition, forced everybody to the table with a lower price. So that was good for the town. So you can't just sign up with somebody and say, oh, they're going to be good for 10 years and we don't ever have to revisit this ever again. No, we should revisit this every 3 years and really grind away at people. But I was pleased that the board, each and every one of you, said you had enough information to make up your own mind, because that was our job too. We got it to you as fast as we got it from the vendors. But at least I think you all felt confident in your votes, which was the desire for the process. So thanking the board for that, but I think it's an important discussion now. Now, what does it mean in terms of some of the information I shared with the Select Board and Finance Committee this week? There will be a savings here, but it's primarily we're just going to hold that as, close it to free cash and hold it for deductibles or other things that come up. As we approach this next year and the end of the year we're in and the beginning of next year, stuff happens. And in our case, we had a family move into town with educational needs that are significant, and it's an $87,000 tuition, and the superintendent was only aware of it this week and made me aware of it. So that took our tiny surplus. We always try to balance the budget to zero. We were a little bit above zero, but it just put a big damper on that and reversed it. So it is often about the money. So we got to the point now where we can cover with the money that's been raised and appropriated in the operating budget, we can cover those tuitions at Norfolk that we would not have been able to without a special town meeting in the fall. I also want to thank the staff for the volunteer appreciation. There's always a lot of hands involved in making that work out. It is important to maintain this connection between the full-time, day-to-day staff and our volunteers. They get to see more of what we do, and we can interface better with them. Sitting down, just having an hour to sit down with a planning board member, or somebody that you don't know that well, and listen to them say what they need to make themselves successful in their board and committee meetings is important information for us all to gather, and I'm glad that so many select board members were able to attend. I think everything else I've said tonight was by way of update. The only thing I guess I'm going to, I just lied to you. I've got one more thing, couple more things. So we're beginning to discuss as a team the ramifications of certain specific federal actions. And one of them is the downsizing of FEMA to the point where really we cannot count on the federal government to come in and be of any assistance to us with a localized disaster. So if this administration won't help Arkansas with tornado damage, I really don't expect them to show up in Massachusetts for a blizzard. I just don't see it happening. And that's problematic for us because a lot of times what FEMA is providing us is with assistance to individuals who are harmed through the disaster assistance program, as well as a lot of the training that they do, which is really around incident command and resource management. So the downgrading of that asset, and then the downgrading of another asset, which is the country's ability to resist cyber attacks by foreign actors in particular. So there have been a number of changes made. In some cases, disbanding of offices. In other cases, the termination of certain key employees at National Security Agency and other places. And a policy decision to no longer conduct offensive cyber security activities. So in other words, we would actively engage in cyber attacks against the people attacking us to keep them busy, to keep them the heck away from us, to defend themselves so they wouldn't have time to focus on how to exploit us. That policy decision to no longer engage the Russian Federation and some of the other countries that actively are involved in cyber hacks is really concerning. So our disaster planning as a community, we're being forced to think about bigger issues outside of our immediate community. What the ramifications are for us feeling like we're going to be on our own in the case of a significant issue in Massachusetts, because MEMA will be stretched so thin, FEMA won't be there to provide us with backstop. So we're talking about, it's not a CERT team, it's a deepening of the community's capacity to respond to emergencies with some formal relationship building and contractual obligations for emergency support. Douglas is blessed that you have so many small business people who make their living operating equipment, being outside, being skilled tradespeople. That's a huge blessing. So if you're in a city of 60,000 and you only have a couple thousand people that meet the bill, you've got a lot of work to do and not very many people to do it. But here in Douglas, you're kind of, your per capita ratio of people who have a lot of skills to offer is really high. So we're going to build some debris management programs and some other things with actual contractual relationships with people so that if we ever found ourselves in that situation where we needed to do it, we would know the price. The people providing the service would know they would be paid. They would be paid the price that they had pre-committed to when the sun was out and the birds were chirping. But that's just a necessary reflection of the world we're in. The only other caveat I have for folks, and I'm going to keep saying this, is as we go forward, we're going to be extremely conservative with our budgeting, because the multiplier effect isn't just a positive thing. Sometimes people forget this. So they talk about the economic multiplier effect. So, I buy something from you, but you got some pieces from there. So there's all these industry links back and forth, so that each dollar spent is recycled to another 80 cents, which is recycled to another 69 cents, so that every dollar spent in the economy really is $4 worth of growth. That's what the multiplier effect is. Everybody basically scratches each other's back to the point where you have a fully functioning economy. Well, it works in reverse as well. So if you have major supply chain disruptions or major component cost increases that change the way we do things significantly, it has a negative multiplier effect. So a lot of the analysis right now that we're hearing is missing the point. So a 10% tariff on raw goods isn't that much money. It just isn't. It's a blip. It's 1.5% of GDP. It's not a big deal. Until you take into account the fact that that dollar is really, the multiplier in effect in the United States is usually around 10 to 12. So for every dollar we lose, we're actually losing 12. Well, when you start talking about shrinking the economy by 12%, we're all going to feel it. And we're going to feel it in some very odd pricing arrangements and scarcities. We don't know what those are going to be, but we know that they might happen, so that as we go forward, I think what we're going to do is start to pinch pennies and think it's, the budget's just got passed, so we're not going to do it right away. But we're thinking about the entire resource base of the community as the reserve fund, in case we get into trouble trying to buy trucks or other things. Now, there's good news, and I'll finish with this. The state has postponed for all of 1 year the mandate that we use electric trucks, or start to build electric trucks into the fleet. So it was supposed to start with model year 2025. Now it's going to start with model 2026. Wouldn't you know, everybody's going to be buying 2026s to avoid this silliness. But that was a change that the Healy administration agreed to, so I'm glad they did.
Can we clarify that? Electric plow trucks?
Yeah, well, all medium and heavy
Yeah.
fleets, right? We're supposed to meet a certain requirement.
Which means you're gonna need two of everything.
Exactly.
Two if you're lucky.
Yeah, no, but in order to get through a storm.
We're going to need a bunch of extension cords.
I like the idea of a reserve corps of skilled people in town, to use that term, in case of a disaster.
Yeah, we're going to.
I often thought of some similar situations where if there were a disaster, who in the community?
Yeah.
We have a great community, people would, but to name,
Yeah.
We have, just a question for you, do we have a regional plan for, like, if there was an incident in, tornado, something like that in Douglas, neighboring communities, like Northbridge could send over their highway department for a day, or Oxbridge could send theirs over?
So I asked this question the other day in a meeting. So we have mutual aid for all three major departments. So police, fire, and highway, we have mutual aid arrangements throughout the central Massachusetts region. And on a routine basis, they work. Like today, there was a huge fire in Mendon. Everybody gathered up, they don't have water, they don't have public water supply in Mendon, so you're gonna put a fire out, you're gonna put it out with tankers and with whatever you can carry in an engine. So you had a large response, right? What we learned from COVID is that testing that system in the extreme doesn't get done until you actually have poop hit the fan. Then you realize that all of these paper arrangements you had don't count for squat diddly-wad, because everybody's going to focus on their own community first, and you will get whatever's left over. And if people feel like they're already stretched thin in their own community, then they're not coming to your assistance. So when half of, a big portion of our fire department was down with COVID in the early stages, and people didn't really understand COVID yet, people got very sick in the early stages. We asked for an ambulance strike team the chairman of District 7 promised it and then was overruled by the other members of the leadership of District 7. It led to a lot of tension. But we were starting to get lots of calls from Middlebrook, and that was our nightmare scenario, was that a vulnerable population living under the same roof or in close quarters would all start to get sick at the same time, and we would need to start taking a lot of people to the hospital and ambulances. If we only had one on the road, we needed extra help. Well, the other community said, well, no, our ambulance is staying here, we're not going to you. So that was a really important learning for us from COVID, is that it's nice to have that paper. If you have an EF2 tornado that falls right in the middle of Douglas and there's a big circle around the middle of Douglas that goes back into the sky, you can count on Sutton, Uxbridge, everybody's going to come running to help us. But if that tornado winds through 4 or 5 communities, everybody's busy and we're all tight staffed as it is, so we're not going to be able to send any help. So.
It's good to talk about, though, and I mean, really, at the end of the day, we're reliant or we're responsible for ourselves.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that discussion happen and identify the assets that we do have and those that would be willing to step forward when called. And I think Kevin Morse had kind of started a little bit of that.
Yeah, but it was really focused on traditional CERT, which is Civilian Employee Response Team, Civilian Emergency Response Team. And I'm thinking about something quite different from that, actually.
Okay. All right.
By way of, I've got nothing for 16.
Good.
Thought I would have a report that I don't have, so.
Any topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of tonight's meeting? Seeing as there are none,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Mike makes a motion to adjourn, seconded by Ross. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.